Hi, welcome to the Bookish Quilter, where we talk about quilts and we talk about books. My name is Barbara, and today we're going to talk about shamrocks. This shamrock block came about when I was given a bag of scraps, and in the scraps were a lot of tiny little green and white half square triangle units. I challenged myself to do something with them, and I came up with this little quilt. Now each of these tiny blocks just finishes at 2 inches square, so each half square triangle is 1 inch finished. What we're going to do today is construct a 6-inch square block. So each half square triangle finishes at 3 inches. We're going to use the very popular method of constructing half square triangles, where you add 1 inch to the finished size of your unit to cut your squares. In other words, you're going to cut 4-inch squares. To construct a block, you're going to need 2 green 4-inch squares and 3 white 4-inch squares. I use the very common method of constructing them, where you put the squares right sides together, draw a diagonal line down the back of the lighter colored square, stitch 1/4 inch down each side of the square, of the drawn line, and cut on the line. So you will end up with, from your 2 green squares and 2 white squares, you're going to end up with 4 of these. Don't press or trim them yet. That's what I'm going to show you how to do in a minute. To trim your half square triangles, you need a piece of paper, a rotary cutting roller, and some clear tape. You're going to cut a square the size you need to trim your half square triangles to. In other words, 3.5 inches. You're going to cut that square in half diagonally, giving you 2 triangles just like this. From this point here to here is 3.5 inches. From here to here is 3.5 inches. And you have another triangle just like that. You're going to tape one of your triangles to the corner of a rotary cutting roller. You want that 90-degree angle to align perfectly with the 90-degree corner of your ruler. And you're going to tape it down here with clear tape. It's important that you be able to see through your tape. From here to here is going to be 3.5 inches. From here to here is going to be 3.5 inches. To trim your blocks, you're going to align your block so that your seam line just matches the edge of the paper. Any extra fabric is going to extend beyond the edges of your ruler here, and that's what you trim off. You keep it folded in half like this. You do not, that's why I said do not press. That way you're trimming all 4 sides at once. It's very easy to do this to any size you need. I have a ruler that I keep here that has a 3.5 and a 4.5 inch triangle. And why I do the 4.5 inch, this is great for using charm squares. If you're going to make half square triangles from your charm square, a 5-inch square, they're going to be 4.5 inches to finish at 4. So I just keep my 4.5 inch triangle taped to this ruler. Okay, now I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from each side of the drawn line. I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut on the line. I'm not going to press, I'm not going to trim. I have 2 half square triangles. Okay, now we're going to make the stem unit. You're going to take 1 half square triangle and your spare white square. You're going to line right sides together, the corner of your white square with the green part of your half square triangle. When you look at it from the back, you should see no white in this corner here. You're going to just put a pin here to hold it. Now you see the excess white is going to hang down below the edge of your half square triangle unit. You're now going to flip it over and fold. What you want to do is this corner here is going to match the fold here, and this is going to be a little ways up like this. How much of a distance you leave here is up to you. That's all your choice, how thick you want your stem to be. Once you have it where you like the way it looks, you're going to finger press it like this, just to put a crease in it. Now you're going to flip that back and sew on that crease. There is your stem unit. Now to trim your units, we're going to start with the half square triangle units here. As I said, do not trim this and do not press. You're going to line your stitching line with the edge of the paper right here, and you're going to trim off any extra fabric here. That is going to give you a perfect 3.5-inch square. You're going to do that to these 3 units, and then the 4th stem unit, you're going to fold it back like this, let all the extra white hang over, and trim that same way. You're going to align that so the edge of your paper is right at your stitch line, and trim all the extra fabric. And that is going to give you perfect 3.5-inch square units, which are going to join together to make your shamrock unit right here. Okay, in keeping with the St. Patrick's Day theme, I've chosen a novel by a famous Irish author. It's the only novel he ever wrote. It's a doozy of a novel. It's not particularly long. It's not particularly difficult. It starts out as almost a drawing room comedy of sorts with a lot of witty repartee and turns into a gothic horror. It's the picture of Dorian Gray. If you're not familiar with the storyline, Dorian Gray is a young, very innocent, very beautiful young man. Basil Howard is a painter who paints his portrait. Sir Henry Wotton is a friend of Basil's who looks at the portrait and puts the idea into Dorian's head that it's too bad that you will age and your portrait will not, and it's always going to be there as a sad reminder of how beautiful you once were. Well, Dorian thinks about this a little and says, I wish I would never age and the portrait would age instead. And that's exactly what happens. Not only that, Dorian, as the story goes on, Dorian indulges in more and more disgusting, degrading, and despicable acts of behavior. And as he does so, the portrait mirrors his sins. It becomes the portrait of a grotesque, hardly human-looking person. And that's where I'm going to leave it. And I hope you'll read it. And I hope you'll come back. And if you like this, like, subscribe, comment. And I just want to say a word or two about the quilt behind me. This is a quilt that I call More Random Acts of Scrappiness. It is available as a pattern, and as a PDF pattern, and I will put a link in the description box below. It can be constructed from scraps, fat quarters, or linear quarters. And as I said, there will be a link, and it is a PDF, so it doesn't matter where you live, you can get the pattern. So thank you very much. I hope to see you again.